LifeGroups, I am so excited to be with you today as we are continuing in our Life Group series videos, as we've been looking at people who we find in Hebrews 11, which we call the Hall of Faith. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it so far. We're going to be going over many different men and women in Scripture that we see exemplified great faith. One thing that's pretty awesome for me is I'm one of those guys who I always have to have faith for a lot of things. I also always want to make sure that faith is something that I'm always looking to the future for. Today alone, I had faith to get up and make sure that gravity was going to keep me down, that I wasn't going to float up to the ceiling and do any damage to the ceiling. This guy is going to do some damage to a ceiling, but I also have faith that God has amazing things, not only for me, but for you as well, as He continues to grow us and who He's called us to be. I also have faith, like great faith, I think, that the Seattle Sonics will one day come back to Seattle and be a part of our great Pacific Northwest. But here's the truth, is that those are some things, but what we find in the Bible and what we've been looking at and will be looking at during this series is this: men and women, through difficult situations, through obstacles, through things that have happened, they exemplify and they show great faith. And today, I want to do that same thing. I want us to come together. We're going to be looking at three men that we find in Scripture that we would actually find in Daniel 3. But when we look at Hebrews 11 and verse 34, it doesn't say their names, but it says their story. It mentions their story. And that is the men of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Amazing men, their story is amazing. And so for us to get there, we need to go to Daniel, to the book of Daniel. And we're going to be in chapter 3. But before we do that, I want to give a little bit of background. King Nebuchadnezzar is the king at the time, and he has a dream. And this dream is one of a statue that's made of different metals, and these different metals all represent something. But he has this, it's a 90-foot, what we're going to find out to be a 90-foot statue, 90 feet high, 9 feet wide. But he has this dream about this statue, and he wants it interpreted. What does this mean? What is this about? So he goes to the magicians and the astrologers, and he goes and he wants to figure this out. They don't have an answer. It's almost as if they are wasting time to try and find an answer, is what it says. And he actually then goes to Daniel, and when he gets to Daniel and asks Daniel to interpret it, what Daniel does is Daniel actually goes to his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they pray. Just a side note with that, one of the things that I think is important for us to understand is that sometimes when we're going through things where we're not quite sure what God's saying, it's okay for us to go to friends and family, to come alongside of us, to bounce things off of them, but also to ask them to pray with us. And that's what we see here with Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is that they're praying, God, give us the answer. What are you saying in this dream? And we find out that Daniel answers the dream, that the metals represent kingdoms that are going to be coming, and this brings great joy, delight to King Nebuchadnezzar. And King Nebuchadnezzar then lavishes Daniel with just roles. He gives him, he promotes him, he gives him gifts, all these different things. Now here's what's amazing, is that Daniel also says, hey, I have these three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Would you be willing to promote them as well? And we see that happens. And then we get to chapter 3. Now in chapter 3, what we see from the very beginning is funny how short-lived sometimes people's devotion can be, because King Nebuchadnezzar is just stunned by the fact that Daniel knows this, and he says that Daniel's God is God. That is the God, because he interpreted this dream. And then we see that King Nebuchadnezzar then erects a statue that is, again, 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, that's made of pure gold. Not different metals like the dream, but is made of pure gold. And what King Nebuchadnezzar is trying to do at this point is he's trying to centralize worship. He's trying to bring everybody into the same thing, because he wants his kingdom to live forever. How quickly the one who had devotion to God is the one who is now so far from God, the God that interpreted his dream, so far from what God said to him. And now he's no longer obeying, he's disobeying and not bringing any devotion. And then what we find is that we find that there's a decree that's put out that this is what's going to happen. When the music plays and they give a bunch of different instruments that are going to be played. When you hear these sounds, everybody is going to have to bow. And then it says this in verse 4. It says, "Then the herald loudly proclaimed, 'This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music,' listen to this, 'you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace.'" And so what we see here is we see that actually this happens and the sounds are made, the people bow down, but then there's some astrologers that say that come to King Nebuchadnezzar and say, "Hey, King Nebuchadnezzar, there's some things going on. We heard about these Jewish guys that when this is happening, they're not bowing down." You guessed it, these three men are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They have chosen, they are not going to worship a false god. They're not going to worship a statue. They are going to worship the one true God that they know that has been part of their life. Now, we jump down and we go into verse 16 and 17, and this is where King Nebuchadnezzar is now angry, he's frustrated, he's mad, and he's going, "Why won't you guys need to do this. If you don't do this, I'm going to turn the furnace even higher than it already is, and you guys will be burned if you do not do this." And here's what we find in verse 16. It says, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king after he's asked them to do this, to bow down to this statue. 'O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king.'" And then this is the part that I want to talk to us today about. It says this in verse 18, "But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Here's what I want to talk about today. Number one, these three men, they did not bow down to what culture told them to bow down to. They did not bow down to what the king asked them to bow down to. What they did is that they showed that their devotion, who they worship and who they are all about, is all about the one truly living God. Their faith was even in the midst of going to being burned in the furnace, the option of that even being something that they could walk through, they were not willing to bow down. But what I love about that more than anything is, like, again, verse 18, "But even if he won't," they had faith that even if God and his will wouldn't show up for them in that moment, even if their faith was so strong that even if they still would not bow down. And here's what I see for us in our culture today, and what we're going to look at today is that sometimes it takes us to have what I'm going to call even if faith. Even if things don't go the way I want them to. Even if things don't end up how I thought they should end up. Even if it doesn't go according to the plan. Even if I can't kick this thing. Even if these things don't happen, I still have the faith to know that God's going to see me through it. That God's gonna help me to know that he is the only true God that I need in my life. There's pressures from the world that come in all the time. The pressures of bowing down to different things, bowing down to what culture says and what politics says and what this says and that says, and the stresses of work. And here's what I want us to remember today is this: even if he doesn't show up in some of those things, I know this to be true. My God, I have the faith in him that he'll bring me through all of that. And here's what we see is that they have to walk through the furnace. They have to be taken into the furnace. And what's pretty amazing to me is that they are taken to the furnace and they are tied up, taken to the furnace. They turn it up. And as they're on their way to the furnace, the two guys that are that are kind of guiding them in there, they are killed instantly by the heat that is there. Now, here's what I'm going to say is that I think even for me personally, if I'm being a little bit honest, at that point, I might just bow down and go, God, you know my heart, you know what's going on, but I really don't want to die right now. So I'm going to bow down, but I don't mean it kind of thing. But these guys, their faith wasn't in that place. Their faith was, we will not bow down to anything other than God, even if it takes us into the fire and through the fire. And what we see is that they're put into the furnace and the flames are going. And what's amazing to me is this, is that we see King Nebuchadnezzar go, wait, whoa, I thought we only put 3 in the furnace. But there's a 4th person in the furnace with them. Can I tell you something? Here's what I know. Some say that's Jesus, some say that's just an angel. We don't know what it is, but here's the thing, it doesn't matter. What matters is that God was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the furnace. Even in the midst of the burning flames, God is with us. Even when things feel like they're gonna all fall to the ground, God is with us. And here's the truth, is that we can take that to the bank. We can have the faith to know that even when we're going through the trials, even when we're going through the fire, God is with us. And here is the thing that I think is most important for us to understand today is this, is that people are watching. And when people are watching, people are seeing how we respond, how our faith can push them forward. We actually see in verse 28 says this, it says, after King Nebuchadnezzar has seen this and realizes, man, everything else has burned, the ropes, all this other stuff has burned, but they are alive and well. King Nebuchadnezzar says, then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's commands and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Can I tell you something today? People are watching, and when they're watching, they're gonna see when we walk through the fire, when we have to go into the flames of the decisions that we have to make, when we respond in faith, when we respond through faith, they are seeing that and going, man, I wanna know a little bit more about that God that they serve. And that's what we see here with King Nebuchadnezzar. It doesn't say that he fully gives his devotion to God, but here's what it does. It says that he sees something from that. And today, that's what I want to challenge you with. When you're going through things in life, when you're walking through things that are difficult, times that are difficult, will you have even if faith? Even if he doesn't show up, I'm going to trust that he's going to be with me in the fire. Even if he does show up, I know he was going to be there anyways. When we have even if faith, we can see all things that we possibly could go through in a way that helps us to walk through it, but also honors him in it.